come up, and I started watching it, and you just have like a lot of gnosis, to say the least, and different experiences. Like, I mean, even like one of the big things that I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about is like working with the Necronomicon and that type of the Twilight realm, I guess you would call it. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's just, there's almost no one like, even just saying it, people are like, "Oh, you're talking about the that fiction book," and I'm like, "No, they're dead serious," and like that's just wild, man. That, and then your King Paimon video where you talked about him from Atlantis, that resonated, man, on so many different
There's
levels.
definitely a handful of people who've encountered that gnosis, and I don't like to say that when I get gnosis like that is specifically accurate. It's
Yeah,
accurate in the metaphorical term. So whether it was actually Atlantis or just an ancient city that was what we would call Atlantis, that's the thing where I play a lot of mental gymnastics to validate the more abstract things, because some things are just they're irrational on the surface, and
yeah,
you have to pull away the little leads to find the truth. But I do believe it 100%, and I was not the only one to get that. I had at least three other people that I work with occasionally who confirmed it separately, and it was I was happy to bring that one out because I think it's something missing. Every one of those spirits is based on something somewhere, and
yeah,
it's finding where they're based. That's the exciting. Sometimes they don't want you to. Sometimes they're like, just work with what you got. It's fine.
yeah. But
So
still, that, I mean, that was incredible. I mean, when I heard that, ever since I've heard that, I've had a different feeling towards King Paimon, and like a deeper, higher level of understanding. Because you're right, it's like, why does he want to be addressed by like a king? Or
mhm.
there's certain beings. Why do you do this certain thing? It's because there's roots from beforehand, and that's. I mean, that to me is like really peeling it back and dissecting it, and that like I highly commend you for. Like, it is awesome. Like that,
Yeah.
it's made me think differently about things, as well as, I mean, even this ring finger right here, the King Beleth,
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
encounter and all that, and then hearing your video before I went into doing it, and I was like, wow, this is, I don't know, it's just so cool. You can really encompass a lot of things, and so
Yeah.
I mean that's why I had to reach out and see, and I'm so thankful to be able to even talk to you in the
Thank you,
first
man. I
place, man.
appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I must say I'm not as familiar with what you do. I know you've had a bunch of interviews on with cool people and stuff,
Yeah.
but I try to get around and check out people when I can. So,
Oh, I
thank you
know
so
it's,
much for having me on. I mean, it's kind of fun. Like you bring up Beleth. Beleth was Belet Siri in the ancient Babylonian context. It's actually a feminine spirit that the modern, we'll say the medieval, scholars, if you will,
mhm.
when they were working with these demons, because at the time they thought any other god or spirit was a demon. That's their belief in their worldview. So they demonize all of these other pagan gods as fallen angels. And to the Christian mind, there is no such thing as feminine. Feminine is evil. It's always bad. You can't have female gods or goddesses. So of course, Beleth was Belet Siri. It was a female spirit that was demonized into a masculine form. And this is why a lot of people probably report a very feminine attitude coming from Beleth when they work with it. It is a feminine. Now, when I say feminine, I don't mean, gender so much as I
Yeah,
mean energy. So it's a very feminine energy. If you ever, you try it out. You don't have to. I've asked this spirit many times. Do you prefer if I refer to you as Belet Siri? And nope, it's perfectly fine. Beleth is there. There's a mask that they present to us to work with as a archetypal consciousness. They present this mask to us just like I'm presenting a mask to you, just like you're presenting one to me, and then we get to shape the details to fit our culture and our perception and our beliefs. So they represent as an archetypal energy. We receive that and then shape it. Now we don't know any better because we are, even me. We come from what we have to look in a book, get an idea of what a spirit is, and then call that energy into the room and get communication. Sometimes it's very abstract, sometimes it's direct, sometimes you get flashes and visions and cool stuff, and then you got to pick that apart and figure out, is it real or is it just what is that? And then once
Yeah.
you do that, you can work with it and then play with it. So those people who experience Beleth as a masculine entity, especially the one, like there's a new thing going around I saw recently, it got popular for a minute, about Beleth being surrounded by cats, like he's the king of cats or something. Look up Beleth Siri. And so people get this perspective and they run with it because it's a popular meme, and memes are a form of magic. If you know, I think memes are it's a way of manipulating the consciousness of other people through symbolism. It's no different than any other form of doing that. So we can definitely change I wouldn't say unimportant, but maybe less important features of a spirit to fit our culture anytime we want. It's been done countless times through human history. So
definitely, like with Inanna and Ishtar and all that, different perspectives. But it's funny you say. I know you mentioned like in your video, like King Beleth can come as a queen. Well, when I was doing it, I was kind of visualizing waiting for a man, but all that would come is the queen. What is her name? Not Palpatine. Padme.
okay,
they all black. That queen royalty came,
and why not? A lot of the times what you see in fiction is distilled symbolism and gnosis from antiquity as well. Don't forget. Whether the people who wrote that knew it at the time that they were writing it, or they're just drawing on inspiration from old sources, or they're occultists who are just like, let me slip in little things. So, let's not forget the agendas out there.
You got it, nailed it.
Right? So let's not forget that. So that is part of it. And, it's hard to say. Queen Padme, I could sort of see. I don't know. For me, the first time I saw Beleth was definitely like the King Haggard from The Last Unicorn, but feminine. It was really weird. Hand on a set, I was like, this is really weird. I wasn't expecting it. You know what I mean? I expect a lot of weird stuff. I wasn't expecting that.
And that's kind of the fun of the whole entire thing, though, is when you work with different spirits. Like at first, everyone has their story, and I definitely want to hear yours. But one of my first ones I ever did was Salos of the Goetia, Duke Salos, and it's because he was a sweet, kind character who was lovable and like he only wants peace. And I was like, okay, I can actually tiptoe my way into it. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to be fine.
And meanwhile, I'm like, okay, which is the one with the biggest claws? I want to talk to that one. Yeah, I know. That's why I started when I jumped back into this with Nyarlathotep, because I'm like, all right, first of all, this has got to be a fake spirit. I want to know. I'll know if I'm reaching something. Mm-hmm. And when I reached out to that being, I'm like, okay, Nyarlathotep, just like all these other spirits, this is a mythology that's told to create an interface between humanity and an idea, a spiritual idea that is real. So what is this? What is this? And I started peeling it away, and I started to understand almost the same kind of intellect as like Nikolai Tesla or something like that. This obscene intellect, if you will, this intellect that's brilliant, very mysterious, very enigmatic and dark, comes through as many different faces and forms. And it's just a new mythology is what it is. The Lovecraftian current is a new mythology for ideas that I believe are mostly, I don't think they're from another universe necessarily. I think some of it may be. But I think that, Lovecraft was a disturbed individual who had a hard life, and he was a student of many literary things and many other, and that all filtered through. You have Azathoth, which is basically, the Brahman, which is basically the idea of the highest source of reality, this dreaming God that dreams reality. It's basically like the dark side of that idea. So what are we working with when we're working with demons? We're almost always working with the dark side of a pagan god or goddess that was once revered as holy and beautiful and wonderful, and the Christians demonized it, turned it into the dark side of that being. Both are valid, both are useful, and the mythology is what matters. This is why the occult is so full of mythology. That's why we work with mythology. That's why you almost can't do this form of magic without knowing a little bit about it. Obviously other forms, people who do alchemy and hermeticism and stuff, they may not get as into it as deeply, but we kind of have to. We work with idolatry. That's one of the centerpieces of our art, and we have to know Why are we using this idol, and why do we have that? It helps. It helps a lot to
Yeah.
put together.
I mean, especially yeah, having a purpose behind what you're doing. Like before, I mean, I don't really use a dagger now, but before, if there's not really a point behind it, I didn't understand the symbolism. Which, at the end of the day, most of the occult is metaphor and symbolism, and like once you can dissect that, then you can use things properly.
We can actually rip it down even further to not just symbolism. Let's go to Plato's forms, and if you want a wild ride, read Plato and really try to learn about what he meant by forms, or read Neoplatonism. You get to this idea that, um, here's how I'll put it. Hopefully it'll make sense, because it's a little hard to describe, in brief. But imagine, if you will, that reality is like a Rorschach ink blot. Reality is a buzzing mass of irrational blobs of whatever. And there's an apparent order to it. Our minds, our spiritual minds, observe this erratic behavior, pick out patterns, and create ideas. These ideas become forms, not become forms, but these patterns that fit certain forms become things. So you take an object that, like this is just a blob of energy in the form of matter. Well, when I pick it up and hold it in my hand, it fits the definition of what I would call a sphere. And so the Plato's form of a sphere is a perfect object. It is, perfectly symmetrical. It has all the perfect features of a sphere. So when I pick up this object and I go, that's a sphere made out of carnelian, and what am I doing? I'm taking a blob of stuff and then categorizing according to a form. Now, the form is the spiritual truth of this object. So in the astral sense, there is an idea that this is. In other words, this is correlated with an astral idea. And
Okay.
when we put the two together, we get an object that we as a mortal being interact with. Take your mind out of the equation. What is this? It's just a rock, right? It's just a dead thing. It has no purpose. It doesn't exist. As soon as there's a mind to observe it and classify it, it becomes real. It becomes an object that it has a spiritual core to it. The same thing happens with us, with these beings, with all of the stuff we're doing. So the symbolism in magic is we're trying to tease out, if you will, the correspondence between one spiritual truth and another. So what is an athame? An athame is a way to cut and divide the veil, to sever, to draw blood, to all these different ritualized things, to make offerings, to make sacrifices. What does it represent? It represents, at its most fundamental level, separation, cutting, cleaving. Okay, those are its most fundamental symbolisms, and those are intuitive. We just know this means I am severing something, and when we use it that way, that's usually how it's used. It's also used as a tool of sometimes authority in different systems, because it is a sharp object. But there's different rationalizations why they call it this, why they use it that. They're very culturally significant, because the beauty of the astral realm is it's not limited. It's pretty much anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is we're looking for things in the astral that we all recognize as being the same thing, because we think that we live in an objectively real world, when that objective real world is actually the illusion. It's the subjective world that is real for us as individuals. That objective world is what we agree is real. And so if I can convince you that your walls are blue, your walls will become blue as far as we're both concerned. The objective reality changes, and we can use that as magical manifestation. So what I'm getting at is what we're playing with is a kind of spiritual psychology when we're doing magic. A lot of it is psychological, and this is where the ancients, when you have theurgy, when you have this idea that you must integrate God forms, spiritual energy, and bring them and make them part of you. This is kind of what we're doing. We're trying to elevate our consciousness so that we're not stuck in this, solid world that we think is the real world. We start to recognize that this is as pliable as anything else. We're creator beings that have the ability to change and shape reality at will. We just have to remember how, because we do know as a spiritual being. We just, as an embodied being, we forget, because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in this.
And that's like how you can manifest things that don't exist technically, and then once you bring it into reality, and everyone else can pay that mind and attention for it to be reality, which is also why I believe the elites are able to make people believe we're limited to what the human being is actually able to do.
Why there's so much propaganda. It's why, whether you love him or hate him, when it comes to Trump, the media is off the wall bananas with trying to do propaganda both ways. They're both doing it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's off the walls. They're trying to convince humanity of a certain way of thinking so that it turns into reality, and to confuse and divide everybody. And my perspective, you would think as a left-hand sorcerer, I'm like, yay, destroy the world, in a manner of speaking, but that's not really left-hand sorcery. That's just an iteration of it, as a side effect. No, as a left-hand sorcerer, I want individuals to be free, and I don't want to free you because I feel like that's a way. That's like I'm forcing, be free or else. That's
Yeah.
but I want to give people the tools to free themselves from the paradigms that hide them, in the dark, that free them from the cave, free them from Plato's cave, and it's very difficult, so all I can do is show my best, show my worst, be sincere, be who I am, let the light of Lucifer, which is, I wouldn't call him my patron, but he's certainly probably the spirit that I identify with the most, and just try to act that in everything I do as a sincere act, not as a fake act. It's not a mask. This is, I am what you see. I don't make things up. I hate that. I can't stand. There's so many frauds in the community.
I know, and that know thyself. That is a great thing that was integrated. I mean, he was obviously one of the first I got a hold of, and he came gentle, like literally gentle, like the long blonde hair, no shirt, has the wings. I remember sitting on a hill, just feeling comfortable instead of having anxiety and worry. And I actually called him Inky because that was kind of my.
There's definitely been a lot of people who have drawn a very clear. Remember, this spirit, especially Lucifer in particular. There's a couple, but Lucifer in particular has shown himself in so many different masks to so many cultures. Little differences, little variations, little changes in cultural identity, but the principle has usually been the same. It's usually been adversarialism, separation from power. Like to be an individual, to take power for yourself, to resist any authority that says you must kneel. Every time you see a figure in a religion that refuses to kneel before God, that's that Luciferian quality coming through. So I've seen a lot of people draw a comparison there, and I don't really care. I play around with that a little bit. I've told people this story a few times. One time I asked Lucifer to, tell me, are you this spirit? Are you that spirit? And he kind of gave me what I call a psychic slap, where I feel chills and I feel overwhelmed for a second. And then I heard a message: stop trying to make us all the same. We show ourselves to you differently for a reason. Everybody is meant to work with the face that appeals to the most. That's why we're different. Every culture creates a different face for us to work with. We live in a beautiful time in history. We've forgotten so much, and yet there's so much still available that we can choose to work with. And I've had arguments with people, I guess, privately about, oh, you're not respecting Lucifer, right, because you don't put a sigil in blue and blah, blah, blah. And I say, relax. If he was really just a blue picture or something that you believe it's supposed to be, then you have a very limited view of what spirituality is. These beings inspire these images. They are not these images. And that's where you got to make the distinction. In my opinion, I mean, obviously, magic is a subjective art, right? It's something we all do differently for a reason. My way might not work for you, and your way might not work for me. So.
But also, it's, the astral realm's kind of infinite possibility, which almost makes sense by, like, there's a different perspective or different means to the same end, but it all gets to the same end, just like the religions or even how someone performs a spell or an evocation, different formulas, but it all is making the same ingredient. And at the end of the day, I like that ingredient sprinkled on top,
Yeah, I mean,
so
that's the fun, right? I mean, that's the fun. When I do ritual, it's not really because I'm causing anything. It's because I'm enjoying the act of ritual. Think of it this way. When you do a ritual, are you causing the outcome by the ritual, or did you do the ritual because the magic's already working through your intention to make you do a ritual? I pull back a little further. Like, a lot of people start and end at the ritual. The ritual makes it happen. No, relax. It's a form of externalized yoga. Okay, you're trying to align through physical objects, your surroundings, your actions, your intentions, your energies, your thoughts. You're aligning your mind, body, and spirit in a form of yoga that's externalized. It's not just doing it that way. Yeah. Through ritual, you're aligning yourself, your ego, with your higher self, so that you're synchronized, you're resonant with that intention. When magic is done properly, you're in resonance with that, and you can feel it. You know when you are in the zone, magic's happening, and you also, when that happens, you don't care if the outcome works. You let go so completely that even if it doesn't happen, you still feel like the magic happened already.
Mm-hmm.
You have to let go. You have to have that severing of ego desire from the outcome. Until you can do that, that's why it's so hard to do magic for something you're desperate for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've had this happen where, like, I'm experimenting with telekinesis again because it's part of my energy work. I want to make sure I get it right. So when I start doing little bits of instruction perhaps on that area of what I do, which is not my strongest foundation, when I start teaching that part, the little bit that I can teach, when I was, maybe 6-7 years ago, I first experimented with the psi wheel and trying to control it, making it move. And I got it to, like, it was like second nature. I was just like, it's doing exactly what I want every time. And I was showing it to people. I was so proud of myself. I got $20 in bets that day. People couldn't understand how it worked.
That's awesome.
So the next day I go to do it again. And this time with intent and with belief, I can make this thing move. I'm learning to be a Jedi. This is the coolest thing ever. And the thing just fucking sat there like a disobedient cat, just like, it wouldn't do a damn thing I wanted it to do. Meanwhile, the day before it was as easy as could be. Mm-hmm. And so I realize now that part of it was, it goes back to what I often say about life being a dream, and magic is a way to make the dream lucid for a little while. But you have to understand that just like a dream that you have at night, a lucid dream often wakes you up. It's usually not too long after that you wake up, because it's usually on your way up already. And you don't really want to just wake up like that, because that's very, that can be really jarring, and you're kind of skipping over a lot of fun, if you will. So your spiritual self will create roadblocks and will create blockages and limitations for your magic and for your manifestation abilities, so that you'll only ever really seem to have a very gradual transition from I can't do anything to, wow, I can do everything. And the only exceptions to that are those people who they're bodhisattvas or whatever. They could become fully enlightened and fully integrated in life, and they continue to be here, but they usually hide themselves in most cases, or they become teachers. And they don't perform many miracles. If you ever look up, what they do, they seem to be okay with the limitations. It's like, I know I'm the universe. I know I'm doing everything around me, and I'm cool with the fact that I can't just make this book float through the air, and do parlor tricks. And it's kind of like a higher lesson of self, because when you think about it, what part of you wants to prove that it can do that? If we were to ask the question,
probably the ego,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But is that you? No, that's not you. That's the mask that you wear as a god, essentially. So it's sitting there going like, come on, man, you're not going to make me move that book for you just to show you're the god? No. And that's what tends to happen. So, this is why look, a lot of people are superstitious about magic. They think it's a series of formulas and sciences that if they just align everything just right, they can do anything they want, when they don't realize the thing they need to align is themselves. Everything else follows that. And if you are aligned properly with your true self, there's nothing that's going to stop you from achieving your true purpose, your true goal, your true intention. My whole life was spent denying what I was supposed to do with my life, failing every which way you can imagine, until I said, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care if the world thinks I'm crazy. I don't care if the world thinks I'm deluding myself. I'm going to go back to spirituality and magic, and I'm going to make myself that person that I know I am. And here we are.
Well, that's it. It's funny because it's like your true will, your higher self, it's true desire, and it's like once you really more grounded, like as meditating every day I'm doing now, and it's like when I do magic that was out like for something kind of for my ego, like I'm too attached to it. It's almost becomes stressful. Like it almost adds a stress, and it's almost too much of a burden. It's like my higher self just sit there and laugh and says, why do you keep doing stuff for that? Just stay focused on your mission, your divine mission. And like when I'm more attuned to that, that's like when the synchronicities and like, you know, once that person, you're thinking a question in your head and someone, a random person on the street, not now because it's COVID, but a random person on the street.
Stay home, everybody. Stay home.
Stay home. But you hear them say like the answer to that question with whoever they're on the phone with, or like, you know, like you're just walking through a room and the TV's on, and that question that you've been asking yourself, all of a sudden the answer just pops up on the TV. It's like really having your true divine, and it's like once you feel tapped in and you've had that, you know things are truly divine within life, like every little small thing. So once we get stuck at those ego roadblocks, you're right. It's like focus on yourself and don't be desperate also when you go into magic, because then you can just be like,
attachment. You have to
do I need blood now on this? What if I go to the store and buy a steak, is that cool?
Yeah. Oh, tell me about it. I mean, it's and as someone who tries to teach these things, it's a frustration of mine sometimes, because sometimes people will pay good money to talk to me, and my advice is to relax. Just go in your ritual chamber and just let it happen. There's no rules. Okay, get the rules out of your mind. Certain spirits have certain things they like you to do, but that's neither here nor there. You make up the rules, if you will, and a lot of times we don't have any idea what the rules should be, so we start dabbling in magic, in grimoires, and we pick up books, because honestly, I've found personally that people are lacking a metaphysical perspective. They go from the bottom up instead of the top down, if you will. You should be, people are lazy. Let's just be honest. People are lazy. They don't want to spend years in study and meditation of what the nature of reality is. They want to pick up a grimoire, flap through a few pages, say a couple of words over an altar, and poof, reality conforms to what they want. And they wonder why they fail. That's not how this works. The irony is, whether you do that or not, reality is still doing ultimately what you want it to do. It's just you as an ego are not in alignment with it. You are detached through your desire as an ego. This is the source of suffering. It's not that desire itself is bad. It is that ego is the source of the desire that causes suffering. When we identify with our ego's desire, rather than our higher self's purpose, fulfillment, if you will, we suffer, because we're no longer, we're not just going, we're going, right? So that's the stress. It's a form of stress. And every once in a while I slip into it too. The other night I had a bad live stream where me and a friend we're good friends. We're getting into like a little bit of an argument about a little nitty detail. We're, nitpicking back and forth, and, we get frustrated. We start going, well, then fine, we'll have to talk about it later, Yeah. and a little bit of that ego shows through again. Like, okay, yep, you still got more to integrate there. So.
Definitely. Well, that's another great part of this all. It's almost never ending. I mean, really, it's growing more. Like that 2 years ago, I remember even saying, man, I've made it to a great point. And it's like I'm looking on top of a peak, and then like, realizing all the fallacies and my limitations, and not holding myself up to the expectations I believe I should be able to be at. I'm like,
those are a form of limitation too. Those expectations are limitations. When you expect yourself to be able to do a thing and then you can't, well, what did you just do to yourself? You know what I mean? Like, this is why I often tell people, don't try to do it the way I do it. Try to find the way you need to do it. And usually that involves just relaxing. I had one student, she was following the methods I had given her very specifically. And she says, I have a real hard time. I can meditate very easily. I can go into a trance very easily, but not while I'm doing the ritual. And I said, well, you can go into a trance. You can go into the meditation. You can talk to the spirits while you're doing it. Okay. Why are you trying to combine them at the same time then? Although that is an important way to do things, why not simply do that while you're preparing the ritual, or do it, whenever it's comfortable. Then do the performance of the ritual in a mundane sense, and then go back into a trance, and then think of what you just did and invoke that into your, and it's just like, relax. Stop trying to do it exactly as the book. You're missing the symbolism that is in there, why you're being told to do this or that. In any real grimoire, there's symbolism in there that you have to find, you have to look for, and that's, you don't have to do the rest. You can pull out all the little words and all the little shapes and all the little, and just, you just need something material, something physical. You need your mind and you need your soul. You need those three things working in tandem as an aligned thing, and manifestations will happen. They just will.
Definitely, exactly. Following that true will is going to get you there, and that's also why some things or it doesn't work out. It's like, was it really my true will, or was that just me sitting there obsessing over something? And
Yeah.
it's easier to let go after time. I mean that's one thing though. I do realize is sometimes with you have to have a journal because if you're not writing stuff down, then you might just have a sigil open, and then you're like, I wonder why the energy is a little bit chaotic. Oh, probably because it already manifested what it needed to, and now there's just an open sigil laying around, you know?
Yeah, and of course that depends on your perspective. I mean, I usually burn sigils when I activate them. I don't usually open them and leave them laying around. I usually give them up to the, to the aether. But by the same token, this applies to, like my practice with sigils very often is I will make up the sigil, and I will try my best to just forget why I made it. I'll put it in a box somewhere, with my various, like sometimes crystals that are charged. And I'll just leave it in there, and I won't think about it. And if I can still remember pretty good what the sentence was that I used to construct it, or the thought, or the whatever, I don't use it. I wait till I've completely forgotten it, and then I will activate it and burn it, trusting the intention that I had when I made it, and just let it go at that point. My subconscious mind remembers, and it's tough because my memory is not that good, but apparently I remember every time.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. You see a show you don't want to know the ending to. You see 1 second of it, you remember it.
You'll
Then
never forget that sucker. But if you didn't want to know, yeah, exactly. It's so funny how our minds play tricks on us. I have a couple that are sitting around. I figure I'm just not ready to open them yet. Is the way I look at it. If I'm still thinking about it, I'm not ready to open it yet.
So even for spirit, even if because I know like there's I would call them chaos sigils, like where you make your sentence, you break it down, make the thing, charge it. But like even with like a spirit of an entity, do you make it and then you basically do your ritual and then you burn it after the ritual?
Pretty much always. I consider it. It's a psycho spiritual gate, if you will. I don't need any of that crap. Nobody did in the beginning. It's not like, the first people who work with that spirit, did they need a sigil? No. But how did they learn about it otherwise, right? Yeah. It's, the chicken and the egg. Did the sigil come first or the spirit? Obviously, the spirit comes first. If you're working with a spirit, a sigil is not necessary, but it is a useful tool for you as the medium, as the operator, whatever you like to call yourself, as a sorcerer, to connect with the idea and the energy of that being. And it does create a portal gate, if you will, that does strengthen, especially evocation. So when I'm doing invocation, I will just, meditate. I'll think about it. I'll call them. Maybe I'll do some incense or something. Look up the way they always used to do it in the olden days. You had two people usually, an operator who would conduct all the ritual ceremony, and then someone who would just sit there and just soak it all up, and then be inspired through that psychosomatic role play, if you will, to resonate with the spirit that they're trying to reach. And then this apparently external entity will be invoked through them, and it becomes a kind of subjective objective integration of some other entity somewhere, whether it's an internal entity or external. I really don't care. I don't see a difference. And people will suddenly know things they didn't know, think things they couldn't normally think, and this is the expression of the spirit through them. I'm actually pretty good at both, but I feel like I'm better at invocation. I feel like when I'm in the zone, I can call through a spirit, and I know what I need to know. I get the communication. It works. When I do evocation, it's usually pyromancy or smoke. That's usually the manifestation medium that I use. It usually works best. If you watch my videos where I have really good manifestation in the fire, the cauldron that I've used, I've had the flame just and form shapes and all kinds of stuff, and it's on film, and people can debunk it if they want, but it's just alcohol in an iron cauldron with salt. There's nothing else going on there, and it's just watch what's happening. You can see the energies changing. But it's a matter of, again, letting go. And in some ways, I think that people from prior cultures, prior history, had an easier time of connecting to this because it wasn't so absurd to think that it was possible. Whereas people today, we have to get through that wall of rational skepticism. And there's nothing wrong with skepticism. I'm a very diehard skeptic. I will tell you what I did. I'll say I've seen something happen that I can't explain, but when someone else tells me, I go, sure, yeah, right. I always doubt every time, like unless I see it. And I'm a bit of a skeptic because there's a lot of fakery, there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of superstition. A lot of people have misunderstandings of what to expect, and this is the fun of the game, really. This is why it becomes such an adventure. Is there's still truth even in the deceptions. You know, I've looked at some people in the community that I don't think are as necessarily legitimate, and I go, but every once in a while, their story is legitimate. There's something still influencing and inspiring that story that maybe they aren't even aware of, and that's fun. I think it's a lot of fun. That's why I like watching people in the community sometimes, and you know, it can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and that's also something with the people who are, I'm gonna call them casual versus people who have actually dived in and actually done things. Definitely, you see that. I mean, there's kind of the new ager type of mind state, and I've seen some people like that. Who I'll talk to them, and yeah, it's all right, but like when you really start to get into the fundamentals and more depths of it, I'm like, no, you're just you went to the crystal store and hung out for an hour and you read some
Yeah.
stuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone has their own methods of where they're gonna be because 10 years maybe they'll be the person
Yeah.
teaching me, you know, but
Yeah.
like in all reality, it's just like there's the dabble, there's the not jumping in all the way, and like for me it was definitely there's the pool. I'm getting closer to the pool. I dip my foot in the pool. I was like, I'm gonna go lay down. Wait, I gotta
Yeah,
until it became I'm jumping head first in. I don't care.
it's
And
like enlightenment in general. Everybody has that experience. They go, you know, I want to be enlightened. Well, why aren't you enlightened? What do you mean? You know,
yeah,
well, you're the God self. Why don't you just snap your finger and be enlightened? Because you're having fun playing that game of running to the pool and not jumping in. That's when you were a kid. Let's be honest. If you did that, there was a lot of fun in that too. Let's be honest.
oh yeah,
You didn't go home crying. I ran to the pool. I was scared. No, you were like, that was fun. Let's go back to the pool tomorrow.
yeah. I think I do the same thing.
That's what you do in a spiritual sense. We don't change really. We just kind of, you know, we get more sophisticated in how we delude ourselves, really, if anything.
Yeah.
So so everything's been about me, and I know this is your channel, and at some point you're going to come on mine and all that. I want to, because I don't know you from Adam, basically. Tell me about your practices and your experiences, and how long have you been practicing this for, and what do you do?
Oh, okay. So my main thing right now, what I'm doing is my music. And my music started off a couple of years ago. I've always, since late high school, I was, you know, freestyling, going to parties, you know, being a crazy guy, getting everyone turned up. Woo!
What do you like club music, house music, or do you like all kinds?
Club music, but I mean, on my own time, it's electronic and death metal. But for my, you know, the way I'm good at projecting is the hip hop scene. But I talk about like esoteric, alchemy, and spirits now. And now I'm getting more incorporated with like some of my songs, like, you know, kind of doing shout outs in a sense, or like the songs kind of themed off of a spirit. And because I know that's gone on in the music industry,
Yeah.
people have
Spirits
used.
love those as offerings, man. You write them a song, they love it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, especially King Paimon. He's,
That's
you know,
what I thought.
yeah, that's like the first one everybody thinks of, right? And I forget who it was, but there was some wonderful lady who did a bunch of videos not that long ago, maybe a couple, 5 years or something like that. And I think she did it for Bog, or she posted them on Bog or something in the forums. And I wasn't aware of this stuff back then because I was still deep in my skeptical phase again. And but she did this whole bunch of videos about King Paimon, and I can hear her voice, and you better call him King Paimon, because, and she just did this great, and she's like talking about the music she made for him. And when I heard this stuff, I'm like, that is exactly the spirit I've been working with. Holy shit, this lady's got it. She really got this spirit. And I was like, that was when I was just getting back into this. So yeah, man, keep it up, man. Do make offerings to them in the form of song. And I mean, let's look at it this way. Every ancient culture, right? What is one of the best ways of praise, and whether they want to do it as praise or just communion or whatever your perspective is, of celebrating a spirit, it's to sing them song. It's
song and dance. Right? Song exactly. And dance.
So
and thank you. And that's, I mean, that I feel like it's happening behind in the scenes and the shadows. Mm-hmm. And so one of my biggest purpose, I feel, called this earth is being a catalyst, a singularity to bringing to life the spiritual realm is real, bring it through my music, and not only my lyrics help empower people to better themselves, and then also learning these other spiritual things, but then knowing spirits and stuff exist. And like, I walk as an exorcist because there's no, obviously, people could say, oh, those are demons and angels and they fight, and there's not really a fight. It's a movement for evolution and like a growth. It's all the same process. But
well, how do you walk? The ground has to resist your foot in order for you to walk. So you have to have things have to seem like they're in conflict in order for things to happen. They're not, though. I mean, and I haven't worked with angels at all because I have a certain proclivity and a preference, but angels to me are not, they don't serve Jesus, this kind of shit. The Christians perverted these ancient ideas to form a religion that they could use to hamstring, the minds of those that they wanted to control. But the things that they're talking about are not wrong. Take the word God out of the Bible and replace it with I. If you do that a few times, you're going to understand what the point of the whole thing is. The difference between Judaism and non-dualism is like that much. If you take apart everything, if you insert the higher self as God in that fiction, you suddenly see how, wait a minute, I'm that. I am not Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is God. Adam and Eve, and there's also a whole bunch of, perversions they did to old legends and myths that inverted them and who the good guy was, who the bad guy was. And this idea of angels is barely even, is barely like Lucifer is a misuse of certain things. They always called it the sons of God, right? This. So what are we talking about? Because in the antiquity, Yahweh or whatever the ones they want to use, Yahweh usually the one is that we use. That was just the brother of Baal. It was the son of El and Asherah, and they were part of a big pantheon from Canaan. So they split off, created their own cult, and they had to, of course, act like their cult was bigger, badder, and better. So what did they do? They perverted all the lore and made the other guys the bad guys. The gods of the parent religion became the devils of their future one. Mm-hmm. And Adam and Eve is like the story of the split between, when El and Asherah, it was basically demoting Asherah down to the point of a subservient nothing, and uplifting El as the son of, it's ridiculous. It's a whole bunch of mental plays that are put together to make you subservient to an idea. And it sucks. It's, in a way, the Christian God, the Yahweh, is just as at the mercy of what has been done, as as above, so below. We have to remember that just because we see it as Yahweh did it to us or something like, we don't assume that victim mentality. Also understand the humanity being a powerful creator being. I mean, it's even said in the Bible, mankind named all the animals. Not that I agree with the Bible, but it's a metaphor. We have this ability to create the names, the ideas on top of which everything is, or that overlay everything. So when you have El as this, divinity, this Yahweh, Elohim, you have this, well, what we believe about that becomes a form of reality. They kind of mingle, and you get this as above, so below idea where it may look like that entity is controlling mankind, but what's the Vatican doing? The Vatican just tells you what God is all about, doesn't he? Mm-hmm. The rabbis tell you what God is all about, don't they? So there's still that as below, so above. If you understand that, you can enchain and enslave a God if you know what you're doing. It's entirely possible. At least the idea of a God, anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, put that where it needs to go in your file box when you work.
Yeah, no, that's actually really cool that you said that, because lots of times now when I'm talking to other occultists and stuff, they kind of have that, like, and even myself sometimes, I have that a little bit the resentment towards Yahweh, because I was like, I went to church so many times, I was on my knees saying this, why, and it's like, you can't have that inner chaos. And like then on the other side, like, because I work with Raphael and Michael. I love them, and Uriel and Metatron.
Uriel's one I keep aiming at. Yeah, I want to work with Uriel for a couple of reasons. Yeah. Tell me about him. What do you keep going? I didn't interrupt you too much.
Oh no, you're good. No, you're good. Well, Uriel, it's just the presence. Like the big ones I've really worked with is Michael and Raphael. And Raphael's for like healing. Now, I knew that there's actually, I wrote his name down today, Marbus. I have yet to call
Bast from Egypt. Look up Bast in Egypt. That's Marbus. Marbus Bast. Yeah, Bast. B-A-S-T.
I'm writing that down real quick because I'm definitely
Bast, Marbus, Vine, Mahis. I think they would have said it Mahis, something like that. Yeah. From Egypt. They're all. You can't find them all, but you can find a lot of them if you research, and if you ask the spirits to guide you, you'll find them all where they were in their former cultures. You can find most of them. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say with Boone, that was the most intense I've ever had it, because I have kind of not a fear of snakes, but I can only hold them during certain situations. And when I was talking to her, I was like, "Wow, you look really good. So tell me who you were from Egypt." She's like, "I don't want to tell you who I was from Egypt. Like, you gotta tell me." And she said, "Bastard." And I was like, "Oh, who's this?" So then I go and type it in. And she's like, "Don't type it in on your phone." And so I was like, "I'm gonna do it." I did. I saw the snake, and immediately, like the imagination, her whole thing, she turned into this viper. She's like, "I told you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." Then the rest of the evocation, I had this feeling, but I was like, "Holy crap, you taught me a lot." Like through my third eye, the conversation, and that was so intense. And like, yeah, sometimes you gotta do a little bit more preparatory immersion.
And
But that's like,
it's not always one for one, but it does split. It does, it does converge and diverge. You have, you know, one spirit can appear many different ways in a culture, and they can appear different ways to different cultures. And this is why syncretization should never be the goal. It's just if you're looking for a little extra oomph, sometimes you want to have a little bit more intimacy. Think of it this way: you and I are just meeting each other. You want me to know who you are now. That's the person you want me to work with, is who you are now, not who you were when you were in fourth grade and you stole the pencil eraser from the teacher's desk and did whatever, right? You want me to know who you are now.
yeah,
The same thing applies to these spirits. Even though there isn't a linear sense of time, they want you to know who they are now to you. They want you to know who they are for you, not what they were called thousands of years ago, because that kind of just, it makes them cooler, I guess, but it also makes them more unknowable. It makes them more distant. It makes them more weird and more. So I caution people. I encourage and caution. How does that make sense? I don't know, but I encourage and caution people when you're doing your syncretization. Don't expect it to be gospel. Don't expect it to be solid. Just use that as inspiration to understand them better. And then that's why I don't call Marbas Bast. That's why I don't call Vine Mahis. I call them Vine and Marbas, because that's who they've expressed themselves to me as. I work with them happily.
absolutely. No, I love that, and that's, I mean, besides going about hopping. Gosh, I was gonna tell you something, and now
I'm sorry, I'm an interrupter. I'm from New York.
Dude, no, you're awesome. No, I'm
give
serious.
me pizza, man.
It's a me, Mario. No, I don't. I know.
I have too much Italian floating around in here. I got like at least half the blood cells are Italian.
Well, you know what though? Gosh, I do want to ask you this without a doubt, Bill. Within the Necronomicon, the being Yog Sloth, also known as the Gate.
Yog-Sothoth. Now I don't work with the Necronomicon so much. I've read it. My friend Magicology, Nick Gillette, which you probably heard of, and a guy I used to work with a lot, Black Tower, Waylon from Black Tower. They're the Necronomicon guys. I'm more of the pure Lovecraft. I like Sumerian stuff. I don't like to say dabble, because that's like a no-no in the occult.
Yeah.
I dabble with Sumerian lore and stuff like that. It's kind of like in my toolbox, but it's not my go-to. I use that as a guide for, because I see Sumeria as the child, we'll say the surviving child of Atlantis. They are in our Western culture, if you will. When Atlantis fell, whatever that was, I believe it was a wonderful civilization. When I say wonderful, I don't know if it was that friendly, but it was wonderful in terms of how amazingly spread out it was. It was well ahead of its time. It was 10,000, 12,000 BC at least. I think it was in the Eye of Africa in Egypt, in Africa. And I think when that civilization fell, when it was literally washed away, giving us the world flood myth, you had different colonies around the world that survived, and the survivors spread out. Well, Sumeria and Egypt were like sister civilizations, and Sumeria is a little bit older. Sumeria was one of the first civilizations to rebuild itself. And there was several others, but they kept dying out. They kept being lost. I bet you if you were to dig up every square inch of Africa, you would find so many cities and civilizations that we couldn't even understand. They found in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, and they're still, how could cave people build this place?
Yeah.
And they don't know. So there's stuff out there that we are not looking at, because the skeptical side of science, which has to be there in order for it to be validated, gets in the way of our ability sometimes to think abstract possibilities are out there. And so I think Sumeria is like, imagine Fallout. You probably heard of the game Fallout. Imagine Fallout's real. Well, hundreds and hundreds of years after Fallout, you have these weird villages, like Novak. Why did they call the town Novak? Because it's a no vacancy sign, so they call it Novak. Well, what happens 10,000 years after Atlantis is gone? You have a myth about a flood and these Nephilim and these gods and all this other stuff. Those gods may have been the kings. So you have this turning of the age, which turns these cultural myths into gods and things. These egregores become more powerful, and they are represented and worn as masks by archetypal forces. So, yeah. So when you're asking me about Yog-Sothoth, what is Yog-Sothoth? Yog-Sothoth would be the Lovecraftian identity of almost like the Eye of Providence. This idea that there is a God form that is peering through the keyhole of your experience. Yog-Sothoth would be almost like the eyes of Azathoth. It would be like the many ways that this dreamer entity experiences reality, and it thinks that it is, each one of these eyes thinks they're unique. So I would say, from a non-dualistic perspective, Yog-Sothoth is probably in that line, but it's also a name that was given, in antiquity. I have no idea. I don't think Yog-Sothoth is an actual Sumerian deity going back that far. I think it's a more current, and I have to look it up. That's, I'm still learning certain things. I know a lot about the spirit and the magic, but some of the technical details I got to look up still. I got to learn. I don't read a lot of books. You know what I mean? I got to look stuff up. So forgive me, those of you who are saying, "What a fraud! He doesn't know." I don't know everything. Of course. I'm still learning things. But Yog-Sothoth, especially if you're one of the people who work in that current, you might have a better idea what it means to you. And I'm not going to step on that. If it means something different, then go ahead. But Yog-Sothoth and all the imagery and all the folklore and all the Lovecraftian folklore is this being through which, the old ones travel. It is this, so I see it as a consciousness that is the observer. I think it's the observer of things. And that is the gate, because that is, through that observation, you have this conduit of consciousness where one being can interact with another, if you will. So maybe not,
But,
that's
what I was thinking of, like an actual, I thought of this gate with all these eyes on it, and it was like a green liquid, like you could walk through, and going through that, you can go into any realm. As soon as I was reading about it a little bit, and I was like, that's pretty crazy, but I like that consciousness, and now I kind of understand.
You can put any label, any picture on it you want. You can hang the picture of a gate with green goo in it if you want. If that's that's a metaphor if you want. Play with it. And this is, as creator beings, that's our right. We're allowed to do that. People say, "Oh, I only want to do the truth." Well, the truth is everything you experience. That's why I made a post today on Facebook. I said, stop trying to label the truth. Stop trying to make it into something that has labels and meanings. Just shut up, take a deep breath, and experience it. That's truth. Boom, done. You're done. You don't have to go any further. You got it at that point. So when you want to put whatever window dressing you want to hang on it, whatever floor show you want to put on your practices, like chaos magic, do it. Just whatever you feel is right, go ahead. But if you're worried about what a spirit will think, make sure to ask them and be like, "Do you mind if I proceed this way? Is that okay?" And wait for a little bit of an indication. If you don't get anything, just trust your intuition. Trust your intuition always.
Definitely. And plus, it's like being authentic. Not only is a human to another human, but when you're a human, the spirit can see even more.
Yep.
So it's like there's no point to BS. It's also, don't be disrespectful. That's the common courtesy. Like, what would you do with the human that you invited over?
What you just said just kind of stomps on the second thing, because how can you be respectful on purpose if they can see your true self hidden behind all these layers of bullshit? If you're disrespectful at heart, you're disrespectful at heart. There's nothing you can change about that. How does changing your tone of voice change what you're feeling? It doesn't. The spirit world, because they're not limited to the physicality that we are limited to, they're non-local beings. Okay, if they have a physicality, it's spread so thin that it doesn't give them physical experience in the same way we get it. They have a very muted sense, more like a memory, kind of like you can remember what it feels like to cut yourself, but it doesn't make you feel it all of a sudden. And it's the same for them. They don't have a very visceral experience of reality. So when we're working with them, they're seeing us without the coat of paint necessarily. They don't need our ego at all. Our egos, they're talking to our higher self. When people, I'm going to go on a tangent. When I do a reading for people expect a sorcerer, someone who does magic, to be able to tell them what they were doing at 9:00 yesterday with their pants down. I'm not like that. That's not how this really works. I think that's synchronicity when it happens. What my gift is, what I think a real seer's gift is to see through your mask to who you really are behind it, and I read that. And then that will inform me what your actions are probably like on the side. So in other words, that's what a seer does. And a lot of people, they have a mechanical material worldview, and so if I can't tell you what color your underwear is right now, that doesn't mean I can't see things that are hidden. In the same sense, a spirit does the same thing. A spirit will look through your mask of bullshit. They'll look behind that, see what your true intention, your true self is, and they're speaking to that. This is why sometimes they tell you things that are lies. They tell you things that don't make sense. They tell you things that don't pan out, because they're speaking to your higher self. They want you as an ego to go looking for it, and in that experience, you learn something they want you to know. So again, when we're doing this work, people have a very superstitious perspective of how to do this. They think, I got to use the right candle color. I've got to say the right things. I got to do this, And so why does King Paimon want you to call him king? And does he really get mad if you don't? It's a good question. So why is he demanding that you call him king? Maybe he wants you to be more aware of your words and more thoughtful about your responses, because King Paimon, is constantly asking questions when you work with him. It's never just, here's your information. He usually gives you an answer by asking you a question, to me. At least that's how he does it for me. So he wants you to be mindful of your own thought processes and what words are coming to be eloquent. He teaches eloquence and these kinds of things. So what's he teaching you then? Does he care if you call him? I know people who never knew you're supposed to call him King Paimon, but I know they worked with King Paimon. Does that mean that he really doesn't care, or that he does care? So let's take a step back. What is offensive to a god? What is truly offensive to them? Dishonesty is that's, to me, that's like the only sin or offense you can proceed with them, because they see through that, and they see you as an inferior intellect, if you will, an untrustworthy being, a being that's not ready for them, when you're constantly filled with lies and self-deceptions about what you're doing. If you're truly respectful of a spirit, you don't have to try. That's it.
Yeah, and plus it's, having I had an inner issue with, pulling out Christianity, doing that. When I was doing evocations or anything, I also had my ego self, how dare you do this? How dare you even, so it's I almost had that fear. So it's the interaction wasn't purely authentic, because I also had this fear ego as my layer front. But I know as time's gone on, and some things that obviously I asked for didn't manifest, I understand why they didn't manifest, and how it was a lesson for me to go through, even such as Belial telling me, command me to do it, or even him saying, he told me, he was like, you know what? It doesn't matter if they say I want to get two beings in a room. If you call forth Raphael, call forth me. Do what you want. Do it. Quit putting
be that
yourself.
God.
Exactly.
Did you watch my video about Belial? Because when you said command me to do it, did you watch my video about Belial?
I watched it, but I don't remember. That was the first.
That's what he told me. I was afraid to work with him for some of the reasons that I'm saying are stupid now, and I'm not saying stupid, but what I'm saying wrong now. I was afraid, is he going to hurt me? Am I going to be respectful enough? Blah 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 blah. And I felt like this wave, and I feel ashamed, and I feel weak, and I feel pathetic, and I go in the bathroom after the ritual, I just say, fuck it, ritual's closed. You ever done that? You ever get when you're just snuff the candles, walk away, right? So that's what I did, and I go into the bathroom, and I'm washing up, and I'm like, fuck this shit. Maybe the spirit's not going to help me. And as I'm looking in the mirror, he comes through, and you get the waves, you get the feelings, the sensations. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And I looked, and my face contorts into that wicked face that I get sometimes when I'm invoking, and I'm feeling my spiritual oats, if you will. And the first things it says to me is, demand that I destroy your life. Demand that I crush everything that you care about. And I'm like, what the fuck? Because he's basically telling me to trust him. He's basically telling, how dare you come before me looking for help, and you don't trust me? If you're gonna come before a demon or a god or an angel, whatever, and you don't trust them, what the fuck are you doing? So, yeah. So I learned that the fun way was, don't be afraid of that being, because I'd heard the stories. You work with Belial, and bad things happen, but you get what you want. It's like a monkey's paw. It's weird, and I'm afraid. Well, I'm happy. My wife's happy. My dog's happy. I don't want to lose anything I love right now. I don't want to have, I don't that little weaselly voice. I don't want it to happen. No, don't take it away.
Yeah.
And then you know, a week later, my mother goes in the hospital, and it's great. You know, that actually served a purpose, but we won't go there.
Yeah, he was definitely intense, and like I've had many workings, and every time there's something that's like a lesson for me for myself and taking like myself to a level. And the other day I was on a run and I was listening to Lamb of God laid to rest. And like even me saying it right now, dude, like there was just this energy that started building around. It's usually on like intense runs he comes through. Like he just knows. I mean, that's the way it started with. I was like, I know I need to work with this being, and I'd always see this fireball horned beast, like just laughing, and I would laugh about it because I was like, I know what I'm gonna have to do to eventually actually knock on the door. But
Yeah, right. I
he,
love how they'll just appear like in ways, you know, the Hindus say that all the gods, at least some of them do, say that the gods are stepping stones to your true self. In other words, you know, like Shiva, you know, Shiva's like their favorite, right? They will be the first to tell you that you're technically Shiva, okay? And this is the beauty of like when you, I've found, and this is, you know, maybe I'm being a little shallow, or maybe I'm being a little, maybe I'm just being biased, but I've noticed that everybody who reaches a certain level of attainment in these arts, legitimate attainment, they're not just, you know, a showbiz person. They're really doing this. They almost always end up with similar reports of the higher truths. Yeah, the lower stuff we can conflict. We can say, well, Belial was red for me and he was orange for you, and blah blah. But the idea that these are masks of infinity, that these are something that represents us in a way, or a part of us, and we all have our own unique way of working with them, and it's all okay. This is beautiful. This is something mankind has forgotten, at least in the West. And I think this is one reason why left-hand path sorcery is growing, why this is a movement that's building. It's no longer seen by as many people as being just kind of weird. It's becoming a very valid, not just spiritual tradition, but industry. And it's becoming more and more validated because I think the right people are mostly stepping forward and talking about, you know, the higher truths behind the black grimoires. You know, and a lot of those grimoires we work with were frauds anyway. I mean, let me be honest with you. You know, it's my own unverified personal gnosis, I admit, but I'm 100% sure that, you know, the Goetia, the Legamecton, all these different things, they're all made by frauds, charlatans, or people who channeled like we did, and they just created a story that they thought would sell a book to their, you know, their patrons, you know, the wealthy who wanted them. In fact, in the case of the Goetia, you know, Johann Weyer, who worked on Pseudomonarchia Demonium, this was actually a work that he made to try to discredit the idea of these beings existing. He thought of them as like imaginary friends. He was trying to, in the 1500s, it was his own form of psychiatry, if you will. It was very early psychiatry. So that formed the basis of what would later become the Goetia, and the Goetia is the Rolodex of spirits that most people in demonology use. People don't know that. You know, people think that this is Solomon. What do you really think this is what King Solomon used to bind these beings? What do you really? He's talking about things that didn't even exist until after Solomon in a lot of cases. Lucifer's not even in the Solomon's works because it didn't exist at the time as a word in the way that we used it now. You know, it was a word, yes, but it wasn't the being, the prince, the emperor. It's all, you know, dissect the bullshit, but work with it. You know, the bullshit's there to be worked with, but it's dissect it and don't be afraid of it.
even if it is just a powered up egregore, it's still gonna have power behind it. It's like whether it's imaginary or not. I mean, for instance, you know, I got the universal circle, and like when I'm doing any calling forth anything, I'm even sometimes thinking to myself, maybe I'll call forth the egregore of Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
And then
I've
like
joked you can invoke Santa Claus.
yeah, exactly. It's like all these things, you know, Freddy Krueger, Psych Sucker, get him out of here. But like all these things exist on one realm or another, you know, and like so anything is possible. So why even limit that, or what can be done? And I mean that's I don't know,
Well,
it's great. It's great.
let's bring this home. Did you know that you're an egregore? Do you know that?
Uh,
Think about it a little.
I know the idea of El the Alchemist was technically an egregore.
I've never heard of that. What I'm saying is when you were born, you were aware of your divinity because you were just sitting there like, this is a really cool game I'm playing. You go, oh wow, you know, you're limited to this little human body, and over time you forget because everything around you is telling you this is the real world and this is who you are, and I'm your mother and I'm your father and your name is Leighton, and all of this, and this builds up. You build up a story. which is exactly how you create an egregore. You build up a story about this being, and this being, your identity is an egregore. So you are an egregore. You just don't realize it because you're so busy being the egregore. You don't realize that that's a mask, that's an egregore, that a higher spirit is puppeting. It is using that as its identity to work in this material world. This is why I often talk about invoking your own divinity, invoking your own higher self in your rituals and things. You have to see yourself as an egregoric spirit. When you die, it's such a bullshit term. When you die, haha. When your body dies, what does your egregore do? It no longer has a body to be identified with. So what does it do? It freaks the fuck out. So you either have two choices: recognize that you're an illusion and wake up, or quickly find another body to inhabit and try again. And this is what a lot of people do, and when you recognize that you're an egregore, when you recognize that, it takes a little work. But if you tonight, when you're going to bed, think about it. Ask yourself, what am I? How do I exist? What makes me who I am? And how is that different from any other tulpa or egregore? In fact, that is what an egregore is. It's a tulpa. Tulpa is, if you go to the Eastern religions, tulpa, we use it wrong a little bit. We think of it more like an imaginary friend in the Western esoteric arts. But in the original form, everything we see is tulpa. Everything we experience is tulpa. It's an illusion. It's an imaginary story that is created by the universe for us to be invoked into. So you are a tulpa. You are an egregore. You are a thought form. You are a story that you think has an identity that is, but that's not what you are. That's never been what you are. And when you realize that, the rest tends to fall into place. When you realize that intellectually, that's one thing. When you experience it, that's another. And when you have that moment of samadhi, when you have that moment of enlightenment, that moment of satori, you recognize for a brief moment at least that you are that, that, not this. When you recognize that, not just as a thought, but as an experience. What's the difference between knowledge and gnosis? Knowledge is a thought, gnosis is an experiential. I know it, I experienced it. Like a little kid who's never had sex before. What are they can tell you all about sex, like a 12-year-old boy. I've had sex, I know what to do. They never did it, right?
Yeah.
So in a very similar vein, as a spiritual being, as an egregore, as an ego, you're all, I know what it means to be the universe. I know what it means to be the source. And you don't, because you haven't experienced it yet. But when you do, you will have a very fun time, I promise you. And with that little bit that had happened for me, I had that little pinprick version that you get, where you have it and you go, oh shit, and you go, I want to be me again. I'm not ready for this. And you go right back to you. And it's pretty wild. I mean, what I remember of it is this dim little shadow of what it was really felt like. It was that combination of catharsis, like when you're crying and laughing at the same time, and relieved, and at the same time, like, oh shit, what does that mean? And I said, let's enjoy our life now. Let's stop taking shit too seriously. Let's stop worrying about, and my life started to change at that point in a lot of ways. So,
I mean, that was like I did psychedelics back when I was 23, yeah. And that was probably one of the closest I've had of like that point where I hit of understanding like how much divinity is going on, to where I was almost losing myself, and I was like, all right, wait a second, I need to go do laundry, I need to go do the dishes, I need to ground myself.
I've told people this story, but no, I've never really. I tried it once. I actually did acid once when I was 12, and I took 2 tabs, and I guess I was too big or something. Nothing fucking happened. I didn't experience anything, and I was like, "What the fuck's wrong with me?" Now, for all I know, maybe it just, it was old and it just washed out or something. I don't know. For all I know, I'm still tripping balls in the middle of the park somewhere, and all of this, all the 30 years since is just my imagination. But one of the things that I've always wanted to do, and I'm not I don't do drugs. I drink occasionally, but not much because I'm too big. It doesn't work. I used to smoke cigarettes nonstop like a chimney, but I don't really get into that stuff. I'm more of a Zen type of guy. I tend to go transcendental stuff. And what I'll tell you is, from everything when I've talked to a few people who've had the full, they went all the way. They didn't stop. They let the ego disillusionment happen. It is exactly the same as what I described when I just had this through meditative, zoning out, basically trance. And what I've come to understand is this: a lot of people they know subconsciously, their ego knows that they're not their ego. They know this. and they seek ways to cure themselves of the delusion, the samsara, the maya. They try to find a way to cure themselves of this painful delusion, because if you don't accept the delusion, it hurts. If you're not in alignment with what you are, the illusion begins to hurt instead of being fun. And if you're not in alignment with it because you think that you're your ego, it sucks. So people look for ways out because their higher self knows, or maybe they've done this thousands of times already. They're trying to trigger that awakening response in the ego. The ego will go out and experiment. They'll find religion. They'll find, whatever it is. And what's the easiest one to have an ego disillusionment moment with? Psychedelics. Mm-hmm. So you have your psychedelic trip, but if you don't have a spiritual center to start from, if you don't know what that means to have ego disillusionment, it's just a cool trip, trippy experience, and it blows your mind, and you get a spiritual perspective, but you don't have the language to understand it. So you can actually become more lost. It's like taking a fish out of the water before showing it what it means to be out of the water. It sucks. And in the very same way, people who don't have a spiritual source to start with, doing these things, this is why, drugs as a drug culture, I think, is destructive. Drugs by themselves are fine. Doing, like, let's be libertarian, let's make it all legal, it's great. But what did the shaman do? They were tripping balls all the time, but was it so they could trip balls, or was it because they already kind of knew what they were? And they were using these chemicals to make it more, to facilitate a more visceral understanding, the gnosis understanding of what the truth was. We've lost that as human beings, with the exception of a few tribes floating around out there in the wilderness. We've lost that completely. And we separate ourselves from our true divinity with every moment. I was driving home today, and I was looking down the road, and I was imagining what the universe looks like right now without the streetlights and without the earth, and what would it look like if I was floating in space? And I realized every last thing that we put in our civilization is to deny the bigger truth of what we are. It really is. It's a way to hide the truth, and we just don't realize it. What do? We sit all day on a screen. We sit all day, chasing after stupid little experiences that are shallow. We chase after sex and food and all this, instead of, think about it. Imagine the universe right now, and imagine that's you. Imagine there's a galaxy out there with infinite numbers of living things living there that you could go and visit if you just disenfranchised yourself with your ego, if you just disillusioned it, if you just realized it. So why are we here? Why am I here? If I know that, I don't know. I'll let you know when I figure that part out. I think it's for fun.
Well, that's also the thing. It's like not getting too serious, because, I do feel more called now working with, there's been different spirits that help me like really dial in, and like feeling that, with the music industry, I really think it needs more divine truth and letting people see the light. And like, I'm not bound by any oaths or anything, so I can go all in and not have any of that extra stuff. So, I feel called, and like that's a heavy mission. But I also have to like take even going into a place and like saying thank you, genuine, like with a genuine smile, or just waving to someone and having that genuine, even something small as that can be just as massive and effective as maybe some information that someone hears during a video or a song. It's like all the small parts, and not getting too caught up in the ego's desire, because then if you're too busy trying to fulfill that and that, no, you're right. It's kind of just.
But at the same time, don't treat your enemy as, don't treat your ego as an enemy. See it as a facilitator, as a tool, as your ego is the will, if you will. You have intention, and then you have will, and then you have action, and then you have outcome, right? So your will is where your ego's seated, and vice versa. And actually, it's in your heart. Your heart chakra would be where your ego, like a jester sitting on the king's throne, as I wrote in a Facebook post. It pretends it's the king, but it's not. Your heart is that interface between your higher self and your ego, the real world around you. The middle three chakras are the chakras of manifestation. Everything that we do, everything we say, everything that we act upon, everything we emotionally do, is through those three chakras, and everything else has a different purpose. It's receptive, it's interpretive, it is experiential. So these three are the chakra through which everything you do manifests. The heart is where the only one you need in some traditions is the heart. You can condense yourself down into a single point And that's usually right around here in this heart center. When people remove their chakras and create a center star, whatever they call it, they're focusing only on that expression of what they are. And so when you're talking about, you know, trying to find how to get your ego out of the way, you know, that's usually a matter of, it's letting go. It's letting your ego be what it is, and at the same time, not letting it run the show. It's a as I often say, if you're not hitting a paradox in spirituality, you're doing it wrong. So how do we somehow identify the ego as us, but it's not us that's the ego? How do we do that? How do we let the ego be itself, and at the same time not let it do the dumb shit that we don't want it to do? How do we do that? And that's the unspeakable part of the art. That's the hidden, that's the occulted part of the art that's not speakable. It is a thing that just comes to you. You just kind of understand, you know, how to invoke yourself through your ego, to let your ego be your mask, to wear it with intention, and allow the mistakes to be part of the process. Because they're not mistakes, they're just what had to happen. They're the balancing of energies that are necessary. So, and
being mindful, very mindful. I mean, that's kind of the Jedi way right there, you know, like be mindful, but more gray Jedi, because
what does mindful mean? You know, what does mindful mean? You know, does that mean that we think constantly about what we're doing? No, it should mean the opposite. Being mindful, if you're lost in your thoughts, why did I do that? Don't overanalyze it. Just be aware of it. Being aware of it is being mindful. Be aware, you know, there's different states of meditative thing, and meditation is a shit word, but it's a word we use because we don't have a better one. You know, meditation can be a form of like mantra where you're chanting, you're focusing, you're this. Empty mind, which is the zazen, that is that you have no thoughts in your head. That is the gateway, that is the doorstep to Satori. So clearing your mind is when you become, you know, in zazen or zanshin in martial arts, after you cut the guy down and you're sitting there and you look all intense. That is a moment of zanshin when you're supposed to be so viscerally aware of everything. So zazen is a form of awareness. It's a form of awareness that the objective world is an illusion, and the subjective world is the reality. It's a de-objectification of reality, so that you become, for a moment, aware, mindful of your true nature, independent, because your ego is that voice in your head. Usually, that's the story going on, just continually going. Mm-hmm. You need to learn to shut that off and realize that you're not that story. You're the spaces between it. You're the emptiness between the thoughts. So when you do this as a practice, you know, when you say I meditate daily, I don't know what form it takes, but when you do that kind of meditation where you clear your mind fully, that's the gateway, that's the threshold. It's usually not far after that you have samadhi or satori, this momentary I'm everything. Usually doesn't take long to experience that. Some people it takes lifetimes because they're not ready, but for other people it happens pretty quickly because they realize that if they're not their thoughts and they're not this body and they're not this story that they're telling, what the fuck are they? Mm-hmm. And then that means what is everything else? Because I'll give you one more analogy, then I'm going to let you talk for a little while because I got to rest my voice. I'll give you one more analogy. Okay, I use a pencil. You got a pencil in your hand, right? And you're writing on, you know, you're using this pencil to write. Okay, you're writing here. When you're doing that, you become fully aware of the pencil point. And for a little while, if you pay attention to what you're doing, you are the pencil point. You stop being this blob over here and this foot over there, unless something interacts with you. Like, you know, if a bug bites you, first you snap out of it. But when you're writing with a pencil, almost everybody, if they really think about it, knows that they can feel the tip of that pencil just as much as they could feel the tip of their finger. They enter the tip of that pencil in a way. It's an abstract way, but they do. In an abstract way, you can enter anything in your environment. You can enter a little bit. It may be very dim. You may not be able to feel it the way you can feel a pencil unless you're touching. But why do we often as mediums have to touch things? What am I feeling right now when I'm holding this ball? This ball's resonating. This carnelian, which used to be one that I think was favored by Luciferians once upon a time. This carnelian, you know, when you're holding it, what are you doing? You're interfacing with it like you are the pencil. It's becoming an extension of what you are. And you realize that you are that ball. And once you start to click these little goofy things, once you realize that the oxygen in the plants around you that they're emitting is in your lungs, and the crap coming out of you is becoming a plant. You recognize you're really the same organism. Like a tree is just an extension of your lungs. When you start thinking these thoughts, it's like bringing two electrodes together and you get a spark. And the closer you bring them, you'll get a spark, and that spark is enlightenment. That spark is the gnosis of knowing what you are.
Well,
and from there, everything follows.
Well, it's kind of like an atom. So what are we going to say? That's John, like that Adam's John, that
Right.
Adam's Nick. When they come together, it becomes a piece, and then that piece, whether that's a cup, all right, that's a ton of those atoms, but then me touching that, and then let's go outside of that, the city itself, it's almost like, and then you go outside of that, the galaxies, all these planets all together. It's like, what is really consciousness? Well, it's kind of in really everything. In a sense, like Shintoism to me seems almost spot on, because it says everything has a spirit to it. Everything has, divineness within it. Even if it's poop,
In fact, let's ask Belphegor. Belphegor! Talk to him on the throne once in a while. You'll find out he's there. Yeah, I mean, it's wild, because you have to recognize, this is why what I do, sometimes people go, well, wait a minute, you are a demonolator. And I say, well, no, I'm an infernal theurgist. I'm a demon sorcerer. It's a little different. I don't worship anything, because I see it all as extensions of what I am, which is divinity. You and I are divinity. I don't think I'm above or below you. That's why I'm Luciferian, because I think we should all be individually free from this idea we have to serve, because we are all God. We should all have godlike power. We should all be living gods right now. This idea that we're all divinity, okay, so what we're really talking about is namaste. We're talking about the divinity in me, is working with the divinity in you. And this is where we enter the fun of realizing that, everything we see, like the New Age movement, is just a filtering of this truer truth that they're dimly aware of. It's another superstition. It's just a way for ignorant monkeys to pretend that they're spiritually enlightened. And we have this conundrum where we have to accept that, just like in antiquity, not everybody is going to wake up. Not everybody's going to work with spirits. Not everybody's going to recognize what they are. But if you're truly on this path, and you're truly invoking these spirits and working with them, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time, maybe this lifetime, maybe another one. But it's only a matter of time. You're on the path of waking up. And it will happen for you sooner or later. And that doesn't look like the right-hand path. It looks like the left-hand path, and I say that because sooner or later you become source again, either because you've submitted to it so much that you just let go of yourself and become it, or because you recognize that you're it and you act like it. And either way, you become source again. So nothing changes except just which path you take there. Mm-hmm. And there is no middle path. There is I love that. I love when people say that. I often say, why do you say you're on the middle path? And they'll say, well, because I don't want to be, I don't want to submit, and I don't want to do evil and blah. And I say, well, why do you think the left-hand path's evil? The left-hand path looks evil because there's no taboos to it. That's why it looks evil. The left-hand path realizes taboo is a limitation, and we don't play with that. So it looks evil to the right-hand path. But what are they really? The right-hand path is submission. The left is complete liberation and self-understanding. The left-hand path is basically not modern Buddhism, which is a very love and light expression, but the core tenets of what Buddhism and Hinduism, Vedanta, Neoplatonism, that's the left-hand path. It's this understanding that you are source, and you have a right as a divine being to make your universe whatever you want. And if you want to be an evil god lording over suffering and pain and misery, that's your right, and nothing's going to stop that. That's what you're going to do. The only thing that stops you is you. So taboo is just a way to control you. And when you pull out all the bullshit, people tend to be pretty considerate and compassionate, because they recognize you and I are the same being. And, I don't have an urge to destroy you any more than I have an urge to cut my finger off. I don't, why would I do that unless I have a reason? If my finger's infected, yeah, fuck you, it's coming off.
Yeah.
And by the same token, somebody walks through my front door, I'm blowing his head off. I'm not gonna, it's the same thing. But at the same time, why would I go out of my way to cut my finger off if it doesn't serve me? So,
yeah,
it's interesting, and it's one of those things that I'm 43. If you caught me 20 years ago, I wouldn't know half of this stuff. I wouldn't have had any of these thoughts. I would have had a lot of them, but I wouldn't have put them into a perspective that I could communicate or work with. I hadn't had enough life experience and enough suffering and enough everything that you need to have. You know, I wasn't ready. And but I realized that we're all enlightened. We're just removing the distractions, removing the illusions that are.
And we are at different levels. You know, my sister used to say, like, when, you know, people who are adults kind of being kind of pouty in their own way, it's just everyone's kids. Like, really, everyone, doesn't matter your age. It's just like a spiritual kid inside. And there's some people who are older and more. You know, that's why there can be an 18-year-old speaking some truth and like really being mature, and then the 56-year-old jackass. You know, same old junk. Same
Again,
old.
I would even ask, why are we judging that behavior to be, you know, wise or not wise? You know, it's what we're judging is the ego. We're validating the ego of another being by judging it. We're saying that person's a jackass. That's just our way of making their ego stronger, really. You know, making it.
You're right. You're completely right about that.
So,
I guess that's, yeah. I guess in my
I do it too, though.
in my spewed you know, thought on that, but like really though, that is pretty wild. I mean, at the end of the day, we're just expressing ourselves as a part of Source, so you really can't. I mean, I guess from old programming, my past programming, maybe I'll see something as bad, but then again, it's all programming, and that's something as I've gotten older, less people I'm around, less media I consume, because I realize it's just a program, and when you really get down to it, the less you have and more you know about yourself, you know, that's gonna help you out so much more than just being like, or I'm gonna judge. I mean, I was a hardcore Catholic for a while, and the fact that I thought I was so much better than people who are Protestant or Lutheran.
It's funny how all religions do that, just about, isn't it? Isn't it?
Oh yeah, hey,
even we do it.
This is good. Yours is good. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we're doing it right now. I mean, aren't we doing that? I mean, we're doing it right now, and it never ends. It's Alan Watts called it spiritual, or was it religious or spiritual one-upsmanship? You know, the most enlightened beings will still do this. It's an interesting game that we play with ourselves. You know, that's the ego playing once again. It's the ego always wants to be better, and sometimes to be better, it acts more humble. And that's when it really pisses me off. Like, I hate when people say, Thorne, you're so arrogant, you talk over your guests, you're egotistical. I go, relax. I'm listening when I'm talking. When I'm talking, I'm reading the person. I know what they're thinking, usually. And I cut them off. We have fun. We talk. I know when they're annoyed. And I go, it's not that I'm not humble. It's that humility is a trap. You know, why do you want to be humble? Isn't it because you want to be superior to everybody who's not humble? Get over yourself. Be yourself. And recognize that you can be benevolent and arrogant, benevolent and egoistic. You can still be benevolent if you want to be. I will still run across the street. You know, if there's an innocent person bleeding out, or just ice about any random person that I have no reason to believe, you know, that I don't like, I'm going to run across that street and I'm going to tourniquet them up. I'm going to cradle my arms, and I'm not even going to let them know that I'm a demon sorcerer because I don't want to scare them. If I see an animal suffering, I'm going to run because I see that as me. But at the same time, I will just, like, you know, LeVay, you can say whatever you think about him. He had something, you know, basically LeVay is like Ragnar Redbeard and a few other things screwed together, okay? LeVay would say, you know, what does he say? When someone's bothering you, what do? You ask them to stop, and then if they don't, you destroy them. I live that mentality. I think of people as, I respect you as an expression of the same thing that I am. And then that way, even if I don't know you, and if I hate everything you stand for, you have a right to exist in your own little bubble, and I'm not going to bother you. I don't care. Just don't try to invade my bubble with your bullshit, because then the demons will come, and I promise you. You know? Yeah. That's when the evil shows, you know.
That's exactly how I am with people. I'm like, I love people. I'm positive, and I care, and like I'm gentle. But like, there's also a side where it's like, but once you start invading in the territory and doing all that, get them. I don't care. Like, get them, and I don't want to have to be on that. But then, you know, it's just like being like a samurai, you know, in a sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way I really want to walk. And, you know, when you said there is no middle path, I actually used to be one of those people. I mean, really saying it's a middle path. And I thought it was because, the right-hand path's all loving and everything else. The left-hand path is, you know, this destructive, negative. But
I don't know where that comes from. I really don't. Because that's what distinction can you make? I don't mean to cut you off too much more, but what is the distinction between left and right if that's the distinction? Because look at the right, they're as evil as fuck. So how can you say left is evil and right is not? It's such a so the only distinction is submission versus liberation. That's the only distinction
that's phenomenal. Like that's great. I'm copying that, everyone. But it's instead of being thinking that way, I mean, like even prayer in Christianity, if you pray, that means you're saying you don't trust the God that you worship.
Yeah, exactly. Alan Watts used to say there's a whole bunch of people sitting around church telling God how to run the universe. It's so ridiculous, you know. So what do we do as demonolators, as demon sorcerers, as infernal theurgists? What's the difference? Don't we do the well? As Coetting says, it's one of the things, you know, when I got back into this, he was one of the inspirations for me to start. And I'm going to be glad to, I believe I'm going to be working with him soon with some stuff. And, you know, we'll let that know when that happens. But, you know, I loved when he had said a few times that, you know, the hallmark of a black magician is a kind of ego and arrogance, not necessarily hatefulness and, you know, self-destructive. It's this belief that you have a right to be a god. Not just a right, a birthright, a requirement even, to be the God that you are, to not be afraid. Even when you said, if you hurt me is when I'll destroy you, and even I say that, that's still kind of a limitation. Why do we have to wait till someone hurts us to destroy them? You know, what's stopping us, really? A decision, a form of discernment, an ethics model, not a morality, not a taboo. But if we still feel it, then maybe it is a morality and a taboo that we have to identify and remove. It's a limitation that is not of our own deciding. It is the limitation of an external source. We have to get rid of that. So at the end of the day, you still don't do the evil. You still don't do the bad thing. But it's because, not because you can't, not because you're afraid of it, but because I don't need to.
Yeah.
It's a weird world to live in. And, you know, you see the world through different lenses when you see that. You see the current situation with the elites doing what they're doing, and all the other stuff makes completely different, because anyone who doesn't realize that the elites are, you know, ancient families working with these same spirits as we are, you know, they're missing something. You know, people go like, I'm going to curse Donald Trump, or I'm going to curse whatever side they don't like. Do you have any idea what kind of spiritual protection they have over them? That you know, just, you know, with some exceptions, obviously, but, you know, it's not that easy. You know, it's not what you. There's a spiritual war going on. There's a war going on right now for the mind of humanity, because when humanity's mind is made up, we build pyramids for free, and that's you know, that's what we do. We are creators of reality, and when you get enough of us leaning in the right direction,
yeah,
we create whatever the elite want, whether that's you and me or someone else. So those of us who jump ship and say, I'm not following your right-hand path of submission anymore, there's an interesting kind of respect, fear, and sometimes destruction that happens towards us, isn't there? And I think that, you know, some of the elite love that, and they see us do that, and they go, if he gets a little bigger, call him. We want to see what he can do if he has some money behind him, you know, and that kind of stuff. But then there's some who say, oh, but he's turning a movement against us. You know, take him out. You know, and you see this happening in our society. You know, so
that's huge. That's actually why, you know, me going forward and making podcasts, I did it once I had the basis of knowing about my spiritual protection, as well as knowing myself and my divine purpose, even if it's through my ego's eyes.
That's right.
My feeling.
Remember that ego is a tool. Use it.
Yeah.
Don't be.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I see that, I'm like, okay, I feel protected, because it goes outside of their whatever story they're trying to tell, because I feel like it's a manipulative submit story, and as we're growing and rising forth, all it's going to take is 10%, you know, and then we'll be able to start pushing it the other way. And I think they know that that's what's going on, and so then once they start seeing certain people, certain things, yeah, they want to go send spirits to go take someone out, or just go do this or that. But I feel with that divine protection and everything else, I can go forward with no fear on that end, because it's like, you know what?
Let's ask one more question. What if some of them want that? What if some of them are, you know, what is the Antichrist? You know, in all the fiction, there's always like this group that's coming together in the, you know, let me rephrase that. Let's look back at like the 70s horror movies. You know, you have Rosemary's Baby, and you have The Omen, and you have all these things, and you have these groups of people that are trying to birth the Antichrist. Let's assume the Antichrist isn't one person. Let's assume the Antichrist is a spiritual metaphor. I believe that there's a faction in the elite that is absolutely trying to by fire, by the crucible of slavery, by the crucible of pain and suffering, by the tax farm. But look, they make it obvious to some of us who study these things. It's not hidden at all. You see it everywhere what they're doing. So if they're doing it so obviously, that means that they are intending for some people to interbreed, to step forward, to create a movement of liberation. Why? Why do they want that? Well, what kind of liberation do they want? They want it to be a certain kind, I think. And that's a small faction in it, I think. I don't know. Honestly, there is a little fog there where I don't know. But I do get the feeling that there is a group of them that figure we're going to either evolve or die. And they, you know, if we're not going to evolve into gods, then those of us who won't need to be called is how they see it. And they want to create the Ubermensch. They want to create the supermen and women. They want to create the beings that are able to manipulate reality with their thoughts. They want that, and they see it as something that happens every now and then. You have an ascended master come forward, and they become capable of all these things, whether it be physical reality or just the ability to invoke these ideas in others to the point where it becomes real. They see that, and they want that to step forward in this reality. They look for it, and so. I don't know. You know, it's one of those things where I don't trust them as far as I can throw them, but at the same time, what can I say? I see this other side of the equation, and I wonder, you know, what are we doing? We're not supposed to submit to it, but we're not supposed to be afraid of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Buddhists, you know, this is why I like Buddhism sometimes, although they get certain things wrong, it bothers me. But one of their ideas of just relaxing and letting it go and just, you know, whether you live in chaos or peace, you can still be just as happy. You know, you can still just have the same life. So, you know, where do we stand up, and why? Why are we standing up? What's our reason for standing up? And that's where I run into that brick wall of I don't know yet. I don't know yet.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome though. I like that because just looking at them as these evil people way up there, just hurting us to hurt.
Yeah, just like a binary. You know, like you're bad because you're there.
Yeah, and I obviously, I mean, if someone said, "Oh, are aliens good or bad, or giants good or bad?" Well, are humans good or bad? There's some that are good. There's some that are bad. And
what's good and bad anyway? What makes something good? So it's really just, you know, like moral. What's the word?
Ethics.
Relativism. Moral relativism. You know.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like that. It's, you know, what's the old saying from the Addams Family? Order for the spider is chaos for the fly. Same thing applies to us.
That's true. That analogy definitely doesn't suck. Okay.
No, that's okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's a lot of spirituality's analogies and metaphors, because you can't say it directly. I can't just say, and you understand. I have to go all the way around, and that's how I learned. That's how I figured it out. You know, and I still have other, you know, parts that I have to figure out. And when I get there, you'll probably see me on television or something. But until then, you know, we'll find out.
Yeah, we'll have it. Well, honestly, this has been a phenomenal. If you wanted to give any kind of last words, and then obviously later go ahead and send me a message, and I can put it in the comments so they can go on your page and everything else. Or I saw you had a website too.
I don't use it much. I'm going to be revamping it at some point because I want to change it around. I'm still, you know, web design is something I used to do, and I kind of, you know, I wanted to have one, and I'm like, I'm not seeing much use in it. And Quetting's like, oh, you need to start using it for more. I'm like, all right, we'll see. So I may you know, I see myself more as a content creator these days than with a brand, but I don't know. We'll see how I figure that out. So it's mostly going to be my YouTube and my Facebook that I'll be showing, and my Amazon links to my stuff. So, but yeah, but I mean, last word, don't need it. I think I said too much already. I overtalked on you. My usual complaint.
No. Honestly, I'm thankful you came on, and this has been insightful for not only me. I know everyone that watches this, and you did not talk too much. Like I'm just thankful you brought all this knowledge to the table and like able to conversate. I mean, I appreciate that. And anytime you want me to come on yours or you want to come back on this, I'd be more than glad. That'd be great, man.
I love cross-pollinating with people who are creators, and you know, I like interviewers, because you guys, in some ways I feel bad because interviewers, you guys don't get as much traffic as you should. And it's like, come on, get on these people's things. I think interviewers are a beautiful, beautiful contribution to this stuff. And you guys have your own works and project that needs some, but you guys are so not humble in the bad way. You're humble in that good way where you see other people and you go, wow, that's amazing. I want that on my thing. I want to work with that. And it's like, people don't realize that that's a powerful spiritual force too that does that. That you're facilitating things, and and that's how you're growing. And it's so I really support people who are legitimate in their practices, sincere in their practices, who are just trying to do a better, build a better mousetrap of spirituality, I guess you could say. So yeah, absolutely, get on. We'll get you on my channel soon, and maybe next week. I'll have to see. I've got at least one other person I'm putting on. I got to do a few things coming up soon with some other big people like I was talking about. But yeah, I think sometime next week we can put you on mine, and I'll interview you and we'll see what we're doing. I'll probably talk too much again, and we'll have fun.
That's all good, man. I'm telling you, talking to people, getting their gnosis, and being able to absorb it, I feel like I'm the most blessed in the whole situation, to be honest. You guys are all awesome, so thank